Winifred Pennington set the schoolroom key flat on the oak table between 6 red-eyed maids, a crumpled linen cap in her other hand. "Whoever wishes to dismiss me for making the young master apologize," she said, "ought to say it in front of the boy." Fitzwilliam, Duke of Hartmere, entered the servants' hall just as she looked straight at him and added, "He did not invent his method of frightening people, Your Grace. He is using your voice." "Then dismiss her," Vivian Pelham said from the doorway. "She has humiliated the heir before the servants." Winifred knew the price of the word's dismissal before noon, and a character too poor to win another schoolroom post. The torn ribbon in her hand made silence dearer. The brass bell cord above the table was still swaying. One maid crushed a handkerchief beneath her nose. Another stared at the cap in Winifred's hand, its ribbon half torn away. The boy's mock inspection had lasted less than a quarter hour. He had lined up grown women and corrected them until 2 cried. Winifred had stopped it, required an apology, and brought him out of the schoolroom. Now her wages, her reference, and the only work she wished to continue, all rested on whether his father preferred quiet to truth. Vivian stepped farther into the hall. "Pack your things, Miss Pennington. We do not employ servants to lecture their betters on temperament." "Enough," Fitzwilliam said. He did not raise his voice. He never needed to. "One person at a time." Vivian drew breath, but he looked at Winifred. "You say my son is imitating me." "I say he has learned that fear brings quick obedience," Winifred replied. "He has your cadence, your grace. He has not yet learned where a command ought to stop." A shoe scraped in the corridor. Fitzwilliam turned. "When you inspected these women, were they permitted to leave?" The boy shook his head. Fitzwilliam faced the room again. "Then I will not dismiss Miss Pennington today." "Did she tell you to apologize?" A reluctant nod. Vivian said, "Fitzwilliam, this is absurd." "No," he said, "it is unfinished." Winifred had expected anger. The refusal unsettled her more. 7 days, Fitzwilliam continued. "Miss Pennington keeps the schoolroom for 7 days. Her wages and duties remain unchanged. I will observe her methods and decide after that." "7 days is generous, Your Grace," Winifred said. "Some men require a lifetime to learn a single apology." A maid made a startled sound that might have become a laugh if she had possessed less sense. Vivian went rigid. Fitzwilliam merely glanced at the torn cap ribbon. "Bexley," he called toward the pantry passage. "Replace that ribbon from household funds. No deduction from the girl's wages. Miss Pennington's duties remain as they were." He left before anyone could thank him. That Winifred suspected was deliberate. She picked up the iron schoolroom key and closed her fingers around it. She had not been saved. She had been given 7 days in which to prove that discipline need not leave a row of women afraid to breathe. The next morning, the trial's terms were formalized in the narrow packing room that adjoined the steward's office. Fitzwilliam stood behind Bexley's desk. Winifred stood opposite him. She wore her grey working dress and a clean white apron. She did not sit. "The terms are simple," Fitzwilliam said. His voice was clipped efficient. "Your wages continue. Your existing duties in the schoolroom remain. No member of my family, including Lady Vivian, may dismiss you during this 7-day period." Bexley's pen scratched loudly against the heavy ledger paper. Winifred listened to the terms. They were a cage of protection. "And the 4th term?" she asked. Fitzwilliam frowned. "There is no 4th term." "There must be," Winifred said. "I retain the right to give notice and leave the gate at any time of my choosing." The scratching of the pen stopped. Bexley looked up, horrified. A servant did not dictate terms to a duke. Fitzwilliam became unnervingly still. He studied her face, searching for the insult he assumed was hidden in the demand. "You believe I intend to hold you here against your will?" "I believe," Winifred said smoothly, "that when a man with a title offers protection, it very quickly becomes a debt. I will work for my wages, Your Grace. I will not work for my freedom." For a long moment the only sound was the distant clatter of carriage wheels in the yard. Then Fitzwilliam nodded once. "Write it down, Bexley. She may leave when she chooses." Bexley dipped his pen again. Fitzwilliam added, "And if either the review or Miss Pennington ends the arrangement, her written reference is to concern the work she has done, not whether my aunt approves of her." Winifred looked at him more carefully. He had heard the insult entitled her demand, and answered the cost. It was easier to oppose a man who relied on rank alone. A man who could alter an order was considerably more troublesome. By the third day, Vivian's patience had fractured. Winifred found the Duke in the estate library, examining a map of the Welsh borders. Vivian stood near the fireplace, speaking in a low, furious hiss. "The girl must be transferred. Having her in the house is a constant reminder of the incident. Send the maid to the laundry Fitzwilliam. It is for everyone's comfort." Winifred stepped into the room. "Removing the girl will certainly cure the sight of her tears, madam. I am not certain it cures the cause." Vivian whirled around. "You forget yourself, Miss Pennington." Winifred looked directly at Fitzwilliam. She expected him to take the quiet, convenient route. A duke did not disrupt his household for a crying maid. Fitzwilliam rolled the map. "The maid stays," he said. "She will be removed from direct schoolroom errands for 1 week at her own request. Her wages remain whole." He looked at Winifred. "Are you satisfied?" "Am I expected to thank you?" Winifred asked. "No," Fitzwilliam said dryly. "Bexley pays wages, not gratitude." He walked past her, the leather of his boots quiet on the carpet. Winifred felt the irritation in her chest twist into something entirely different. The man was infuriatingly precise. That afternoon, Fitzwilliam arrived at the schoolroom. He did not announce his intention. He simply opened the door, walked to the back of the room, and sat in a narrow wooden chair that was entirely too small for his frame. Winifred was conducting a geography lesson. The boy was at the blackboard, chalk in hand. "Continue," Fitzwilliam ordered. Winifred ignored the command and turned to the boy. "The borders of Monmouthshire, if you please." The boy drew the line, but his hand slipped. The chalk squeaked violently. He had placed the border 3 miles too far east. The boy froze. He looked at his father, his small shoulders bracing for the inevitable sharp correction. Winifred did not look at the Duke. She looked at the boy. "An ambitious invasion of your neighbors. Do you intend to fund a standing army to hold that territory?" The boy blinked, confused. Then slowly a small smile broke across his face. "No, Miss Pennington. Then I suggest you retreat to the proper river line." The boy erased the mark and redrew it correctly. Winifred nodded. She glanced at the back of the room. Fitzwilliam was watching her. He had not intervened. He had not overridden her instruction. He had let her method stand. "Miss Pennington has the schoolroom," Fitzwilliam said quietly, though whether he was speaking to the boy or to himself, Winifred could not tell, could not. When the lesson ended, the boy met the young maid with the newly replaced ribbon in the east passage. She carried a basket of folded towels high against her chest and slowed when she saw him. The old flinch was small, but Winifred saw it. So did the boy. He looked once toward his father, then back at the maid. "May I carry the basket to the linen room?" he asked. The maid blinked. "If you wish, my lord." He took the lighter half of the load and walked beside her rather than ahead. Fitzwilliam said nothing. His silence for once did useful work. By the second week, a fragile, unexpected rhythm had begun to settle over Hartmere Hall. The 7-day trial expired without ceremony. Winifred remained because the work still needed doing and because no one had tried to make her gratitude part of the wages. The household was also preparing for the heir's late summer visit to the western tenant districts. Maps, trunks, horses, and rest stops gave them more than enough to disagree over. The first change began with a bell. For months, the young heir had developed a habit of ringing the brass bell cord in his room repeatedly whenever he required the smallest item, a sharpened pencil, a glass of water, a dropped toy. The maids would drop their linens and run. On a Tuesday morning, Winifred took the bell cord and tied it in a high knot out of the boy's reach. "One bell, one request," Winifred told him. "If you require a second item, you will walk down the stairs and ask the staff directly." When Fitzwilliam discovered the new rule, he frowned. "It is inefficient," he said, standing in the corridor. "A footman should simply be stationed outside his door during study hours. If you station a footman, you teach your son that his boredom requires an audience," Winifred replied. "Let the rule stand for a morning." Fitzwilliam crossed his arms. "And if he requires something genuinely urgent, then his legs work perfectly well." 2 hours later, the boy realized he had forgotten his sketching charcoal. He reached for the bell, found it knotted, and let out a huff of frustration. He stomped down 2 flights of stairs to the kitchen, asked the cook for the charcoal, and trudged back up. Fitzwilliam watched from the gallery. He saw the maids finish turning out the drawing room without a single interruption. "Your system is annoyingly efficient," Fitzwilliam noted when he passed Winifred in the hall later. "I shall try to recover from the compliment, Your Grace," she replied, her tone perfectly flat. A week later, they sat over the route map in the library. Fitzwilliam marked carriage stops while Winifred added the names of the tenants the boy would be expected to greet. "He must know the estate boundaries," Fitzwilliam insisted, tapping the thick paper. "He must know the names of the people who farm the boundaries," Winifred countered. "Otherwise, he is merely memorizing dirt." Fitzwilliam sighed and attempted to fold the heavy county map. He creased it incorrectly, leaving a large, awkward flap of parchment sticking out. He tried to force it flat, and the paper buckled. Winifred watched him struggle. "A dukedom has evidently not improved your corners, Your Grace." Fitzwilliam glared at the parchment. "It has improved my servants. The maps remain rebellious." The young boy sitting at the adjacent table let out a sudden bright laugh. Winifred paused. It was the first time she had heard the boy laugh at a joke where no one was the victim. She looked at Fitzwilliam. A reluctant smile was pulling at the corners of the Duke's mouth, softening the harsh lines of his jaw. He looked human. He looked entirely too handsome. Winifred bent over the map before he caught her smiling. Working beside him was becoming a less sensible arrangement by the day. The door opened before either of them spoke again. Bexley entered holding a letter. "From Lady Vivian, Your Grace." Fitzwilliam broke the seal and read. The humour left his face 1 line at a time. "She is coming," Winifred asked. "In a fortnight," he said. "She intends to bring a governess of her own choosing and settle the question of my son's education before the western journey." The boy stopped turning his piece of chalk between his fingers. Winifred looked back at the county map. The route had not changed, but the weeks ahead had acquired a deadline. "Then we had better teach him where Monmouthshire is before your aunt moves it for us," she said. Fitzwilliam's mouth almost smiled. Almost. The following week, matters worsened during the packing. The boy stood in the center of his bedroom, surrounded by toys, books, and wooden soldiers. "I want 3 trunks," he commanded the hovering footman. "You may have one," Winifred said from the doorway. "Choose what matters. You will carry your own sketchbook." The boy spun around. "Papa," he appealed to Fitzwilliam, who was walking past. "Does a duke's son have to carry his own things?" Fitzwilliam stopped. He looked at the boy, then at Winifred. He could have overridden her. He could have ordered 12 trunks. Instead, his voice carried the heavy, unmistakable weight of command. A duke's son should know the weight of what he orders carried. 1 trunk. Miss Pennington's rule holds. He walked away. Winifred felt a flush of heat rise in her chest. He had taken her lesson and put it into a sentence his son would remember. The letter seemed to follow them through the house. Winifred refused to let it turn every lesson into an audition. Fitzwilliam began checking departure times twice. By the 5th week, the carriage yard supplied a sterner test. During a timing rehearsal, one of the carriage horses threw a shoe on the cobbles. The head groom paled. Winifred saw Fitzwilliam's jaw tighten and knew the kind of order that usually followed faster, sooner, no excuses. Winifred stepped forward. "We will adjust the departure time by an hour," she said calmly to the boy. "Go inside and fetch your reading book." The boy frowned. "Whose fault is it?" "Sometimes a shoe is merely a shoe," Winifred said. Fitzwilliam watched her diffuse the tension without assigning blame. He turned to the groom, his voice returning to its normal calm pitch. "Give the farrier the time he needs. Redistribute the footman to the second carriage." When the yard cleared, Fitzwilliam stood near the wheel, looking down at Winifred. The autumn wind pulled a stray curl from her practical bun. He did not look at her like an employer assessing a servant. He looked at her with an attention so fixed that she became abruptly aware of the loose curl at her cheek. "You do not panic," he observed quietly. "Panic is easiest when someone else must repair the consequences," she said. He stepped half a pace closer. The leather harness creaked in the wind. "I am beginning to think you could govern the entire estate, Miss Pennington." "I have no desire to govern your estate, Your Grace. I only desire to govern my schoolroom." "A pity," he murmured. Then Bexley crossed the yard toward them, his expression grave. "The talk has reached neighbouring houses, Your Grace. Lady Vivian's account is being repeated." "What account?" Winifred asked. Bexley looked as though he would rather have swallowed the words. "That Miss Pennington means to leave Hartmere with the heir before Lady Vivian arrives." The quiet yard suddenly felt very cold. By breakfast the next morning, the rumour was everywhere. Winifred ignored the whispers in the servants' hall. She knew her work, and she knew what she had never intended. Winifred had seen how Fitzwilliam met disorder. He narrowed choices until nothing could move without his permission. Fear for his son made that habit worse, not better. Winifred was walking down the east corridor when Oswald Bexley intercepted her. He looked deeply uncomfortable. "Miss Pennington, His Grace has issued new household instructions." Winifred stopped. "Instructions? You are not to take a carriage out alone. The porter is not to open the main gate for you without His Grace's leave. Any letter you send is to pass through my office first." For a moment, Winifred heard nothing beyond the tick of the corridor clock. The fourth term in Bexley's ledger had lasted 5 weeks. One frightened order had struck it through without ink. She found Fitzwilliam in the map room. "You locked the gate," she said, her voice terrifyingly flat. Fitzwilliam turned from the window. "It is a precaution. The rumours my aunt is spreading are dangerous. Until she arrives and this is settled, you will remain on the estate. It is for your own protection." Winifred walked toward him, her hands folded rigidly over her apron. "How fortunate for your son." Fitzwilliam frowned. "What does my son have to do with this? He need never learn kindness," Winifred said, her tone dripping with acid. "If a locked gate produces obedience so much faster." "Winifred, Miss Pennington," she corrected sharply. "I am an employee, Your Grace, one you have decided to imprison." She turned on her heel and walked out. She went straight to her small room in the servants' wing, pulled her valise from under the bed, and began packing her one extra work dress. She would not stay in a house where her freedom was a gift the Duke could revoke at his pleasure. She reached into her apron pocket and closed her hand around the heavy iron schoolroom key. She would leave it on his desk. She walked down the stairs, her valise in hand. As she reached the landing, she heard a voice from the main hall below. "But you cannot go," the 9-year-old heir was saying to one of the maids, who was carrying a basket of linens toward the side door. "I have to fetch the drying racks, my lord," the maid said nervously. "You cannot—" The boy repeated his voice, taking on a chillingly familiar exact cadence. "You only go when Papa says. He locked the gate. You stay where you are put." Winifred froze. Below her, standing in the doorway of the library, was Fitzwilliam. He was staring at his son. The boy had not shouted. He had used the calm, certain tone that made refusal sound impossible. "You stay where you are put." Fitzwilliam looked up and saw Winifred on the landing with her valise. His face changed. No one needed to explain whose lesson the child had repeated. Fitzwilliam did not hesitate. He walked into the center of the hall. "Bexley!" His voice rang out, echoing off the stone walls. The steward appeared immediately. The maids stopped in their tracks. "The gate order was mine. It was wrong," Fitzwilliam said clearly enough for every servant in the hall to hear. "Miss Pennington is free to leave Hartmere whenever she chooses. She need not ask my leave for the gate, and no letter of hers is to be opened, delayed, or carried to Bexley first." He turned to the head footman. "Open the gate. No one is to stop her." He looked back up at Winifred. He did not offer a convoluted excuse. He did not blame the rumor. He named his own failure. "If Miss Pennington chooses to leave Hartmere this afternoon, her full reference and her full wages stand. See a carriage prepared if she asks for it." There was no excuse tucked inside the order. He had named what he had done and undone it before the same household that had heard the restriction. Winifred slowly descended the stairs. She stopped at the bottom, looking at the Duke. His dark eyes were stripped of their usual armor. He was waiting for her to walk out the door. "That," Winifred said softly, "is a much better lesson." She turned and carried her valise back up the stairs. She did not leave, but she did not forgive him instantly. The gate was open. The next evening, with Vivian's carriage, due to arrive by morning, Winifred found Fitzwilliam in the map room. The heavy curtains were drawn against the dark border night. Winifred stepped inside and closed the door. She did not raise her voice. She did not use her usual sharp irony. "Your aunt will demand a reckoning tomorrow," Winifred said quietly. "She will attempt to drag me into the parlor and humiliate me in front of the staff to prove I am unfit." Fitzwilliam stood behind the table. "I will not allow her to insult you." Every instinct Winifred possessed urged her to prepare the sharpest sentence first. If she met Vivian alone, no one could accuse her of hiding behind a duke. It would also mean Fitzwilliam never had to prove he could use his authority where it belonged and leave her freedom untouched. She took a step closer to the table. "I do not want another contest with your aunt in a doorway," Winifred said, her voice dropping. "You are her duke and her nephew. You answer to your family. I will answer for myself afterward." Fitzwilliam's fingers stilled on the map. His eyes lifted to hers, and she knew he understood the size of what she had placed in his hands. "I will handle my family," Fitzwilliam promised. His voice was a low, rough rumble in the quiet room. "But you know the cost. Society will say Hartmere allows a servant to govern him." "Then for once," Winifred said, "they may underestimate both of us." She reached out to trace the edge of the map. Fitzwilliam's hand was resting on the parchment. He did not move his hand away. "I packed my bag yesterday." Winifred admitted a truthful vulnerability she rarely allowed. "But I kept the schoolroom key in my pocket. Part of me still wanted to return to the work." Fitzwilliam looked at her hand inches from his own. He did not cover her fingers or turn the admission into a promise she had not made. "Then I will make certain the choice to use that key remains yours," he said. She left her hand where it was. The narrow strip of map between their fingers suddenly seemed an absurdly inadequate distance. Vivian Pelham's carriage arrived at 10 the next morning. The older woman swept into the entrance hall without sparing the footman a glance. "We leave for Gloucestershire within the hour," she announced. "The boy requires a proper household, and I have a governess waiting who understands her station." Winifred was crossing the gallery above. The answer that rose to her tongue was sharp enough to draw blood. She descended 3 steps before stopping herself. "If affection is improper influence, madam," she said, "Hartmere has endured a remarkably respectable shortage of it." Vivian's face hardened. Winifred could have added more. She wanted to. Instead, she remembered the map room and the task she had chosen to give Fitzwilliam. "His Grace is expecting you in the library," she said. "I have a lesson to finish." She turned away before the older woman could turn the entrance hall into another trial. Upstairs, the boy stumbled twice over a history passage because he was listening for voices below. To the third mistake, he set down the primer. "Is Aunt Vivian taking me away because I was bad?" "No," Winifred said. "Adults are responsible for adult decisions. Yours is to finish that paragraph and remember that asking is not the same as ordering." He considered this, plainly dissatisfied with the division of labor, then picked up the book again. By the end of the lesson, the raised voices below had ceased. Near 7, Bexley came to the schoolroom with a message. The family discussion would begin in a quarter hour. Miss Pennington was not required to attend, but the library door would be open to her if she wished to hear what was said about her employment. Winifred went. She had trusted Fitzwilliam to speak. She had not promised to make herself deaf. The library smelled of coal smoke and old leather. Fitzwilliam sat behind the desk. Vivian refused the chair opposite him and stood with both gloved hands braced on its back. Bexley waited near the bookcase with the household ledger. Winifred took a place beside the long window, close enough to hear every word and far enough that no one could mistake whose quarrel this was. "You are creating a scandal," Vivian said. "The county already says a servant dictates the heir's education. She has made the boy dependent on her, and now she expects to be raised above her station." "No," Winifred said. Vivian turned. Winifred met her look. "I have asked for my wages, my work, and the right to leave it. Nothing more." She folded her hands and gave the room back to Fitzwilliam. He did not thank her. Winifred was glad of it. "You intend to remove my son to Gloucestershire," he said to his aunt. "State the authority by which you intend to do so." Vivian stared at him. "Authority, I am speaking of family duty. Family expectation is not authority." His tone remained level. "I am his father. He remains at Hartmere. His education is my responsibility, and your former voice in it ends today. You will not remove him from this house, choose his governess, or dismiss anyone in my household. You cannot shut out your own family because a maid has turned your head. I can decide who directs my son and who enters my house." He looked toward Bexley. "Read Miss Pennington's terms." Bexley opened the ledger. "Her wages continue through the quarter. She may give notice and leave the estate at her own choosing. Her written reference is not to be altered on account of Lady Vivian's objection to her conduct in the schoolroom." Fitzwilliam nodded once. "Make the reference ready tonight. If Miss Pennington leaves tomorrow next week or at quarter's end, she takes it with the wages due to her. No member of this family is to make either conditional upon her remaining here." Winifred felt the schoolroom key against her skirt pocket. He had not promised to keep her. He was making it possible for her to go. Vivian's mouth thinned. "Society will say you chose a servant over your own blood. Then society may finally describe one of my choices accurately." Fitzwilliam's expression did not change. "The carriage is waiting to return you to Gloucestershire, Aunt. Future visits to Hartmere will be by my invitation." Vivian snatched up her reticule and walked out. Winifred remained until the carriage wheels grated over the drive. No applause followed. Bexley closed the ledger. Fitzwilliam signed the reference and the household went on with supper. That plainness mattered more than any grander victory. That evening the schoolroom was empty. Winifred stood by the blackboard wiping the slate clean with a damp cloth. The estate was silent. The threat was gone. Footsteps sounded in the corridor. Fitzwilliam appeared in the open doorway. He did not step inside. Though the door stood open, he stopped at the threshold. "My aunt has departed," he said quietly. "The boy remains. Bexley has your reference written and signed. The carriage is available to you should you require it." Winifred stopped wiping the slate and turned. He had done exactly what he promised. Her wages and written reference no longer depended on whether she pleased his family. "I am aware," Winifred said. Fitzwilliam rested one hand against the doorframe. "I want you to stay," he said. "I also want to court you. If your answer is no, it will alter neither your wages, your reference, nor your place in this house." Winifred looked at the open corridor behind him. The gate was unlocked. The road was clear. She looked down at the iron schoolroom key resting in the pocket of her apron. She walked slowly toward the doorway. She stopped inches from him. "I will stay through the next term because the work is mine," Winifred said, her voice dropping into that low, private register. "You may court me, your grace, because the choice is also mine." Fitzwilliam closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, a sharp exhale escaping his chest. He opened them, his gaze dropping to her mouth. He began to speak, perhaps, to offer a grander declaration of his intent. Winifred raised one eyebrow. Fitzwilliam stopped. "I want you here," he amended. "Better." She nearly closed the distance. Her fingers found the heavy shape of the iron key through the cloth of her pocket. And she stopped. Courtship was not marriage, but a duke's courtship carried a future crowded with assumptions. A duchess did not earn wages in a schoolroom. Winifred had fought too hard for work that was hers to let affection turn it into a memory. Fitzwilliam saw the pause. His expression sharpened not with displeasure, but attention. "What?" he asked. "If this courtship succeeds," Winifred said, "I will not discover afterward that your admiration was only for the woman who ran your schoolroom until you made a lady of her." His answer came without flourish. "I am courting you, not annexing the schoolroom. I am not asking for your key. What you do with your work later will be a question you answer with me, not one I answer for you." Winifred studied him for another heartbeat. "That is an inconveniently sensible answer. I have several. Do not become vain." Too late. Then she closed the final inch herself, rose on her toes, and kissed him. For one startled heartbeat, Fitzwilliam did not move. Then his hands settled lightly at her waist, steady rather than possessive. When she drew back, his forehead almost touched hers. "Do not look so astonished," she murmured. "I had made no provision for victory," he said. That made her smile. She caught the edge of his sleeve and drew him one step over the schoolroom threshold before letting go. 3 months later, morning frost silvered the window panes of Hartmere Hall. The county had not forgotten. 2 neighbouring families had stopped calling, and one cousin's letters to Fitzwilliam had grown shorter. Vivian had not returned. None of it altered Winifred's wages or her authority in the schoolroom. At quarter-day, Bexley placed her signed reference in her own hands, and she locked it in her desk unused. Fitzwilliam courted her with the same inconvenient exactness he brought to estate accounts. If he promised 4 o'clock, he appeared at 4. If the boys' sums came first, he did not send for her early. A week earlier, she had agreed that their courtship might properly be called an engagement. When Fitzwilliam asked whether she meant to negotiate every practical consequence before he chose a ring, Winifred replied, "You are marrying a schoolroom attendant." "I had noticed." "Then your powers of observation may yet save us." Now the household was preparing at last for the postponed journey to the western tenants. Footmen crossed the corridors with trunks, while grooms called to one another in the yard below. In the schoolroom, Winifred adjusted the globe. The 9-year-old boy was copying out his sums when his wooden ruler slipped from the desk and skidded beneath a heavy bookcase. He looked at the bell cord. Winifred said nothing. After a moment he stood, went to the doorway, and waited until a maid passed with an armful of linens. It was Mary, the same young woman whose cap ribbon had been torn months before. "Excuse me, Mary," the boy said. "When you have finished with the breakfast trays, would you have time to help me move the bookcase? My ruler has gone beneath it." Mary shifted the linens on her hip. She did not flinch. "When the trays are done, my lord." "Thank you." He returned to his desk and began the next sum without ringing once. Winifred turned the globe a fraction farther east. Praise would have made the moment a performance. Better to let an ordinary request remain ordinary. A shadow paused beyond the schoolroom door. Fitzwilliam had been passing with a rolled county map beneath one arm and had plainly heard the exchange. He did not enter to explain his son's improvement to anyone. He merely waited until Mary had gone, then knocked 3 times on the oak frame. Winifred looked up. His dark coat was immaculate. His hair had been less successfully governed by the morning wind. He looked, she thought, infuriatingly pleased with himself for a man who had not yet spoken. "May I come in?" he asked. Winifred leaned one hip against the desk. The iron schoolroom key rested in her pocket, familiar as a coin. "If you brought the map for the journey." Fitzwilliam raised the rolled parchment. He had managed to hold it upside down. "Your Grace," Winifred said, "Wales has not moved since breakfast." He examined the map, as if the country might have committed an administrative offence while unattended. "A failure of supervision. I shall investigate." The boy laughed. Mary, somewhere down the corridor, laughed too. Winifred crossed to the door, her fingers brushing the key before she opened it wider. "Come in, Fitzwilliam." He stepped over the threshold and joined her at the map table. The parchment crackled between them, the bell cord remained still, and the schoolroom key stayed where it belonged with Winifred. The end.